I do struggle with enduring the non-doing of certain things out of faith or trust in the instruction, since doing so is actually a pretty painful process. My impression is that the way I dealt with unwholesome things in the past stands in the way here. Whenever I felt the habit was not good, like drinking, smoking, or eating a bag of crisps, I continued doing it, but was consciously paying attention to the drawbacks, how I felt afterwards, and so on, until I could let go naturally. This seems like a much more gradual and less painful approach. I do not need to restrain myself that much, have my own experience of a criteria for good and bad, and I factually do let go of bad habits that way. What is the benefit or advantage to say no to things in the way that you teach, and enduring much more pain than I seem to need to endure?
Well, the first thing to understand here is that the pain that comes with enduring things is not in fact caused by the restraint, it's caused by the unabandoned craving and attachment. So through restraining yourself rightly, which begins by keeping 5 precepts and then adding the celibacy and also the non-distraction, what will happen is that your mind becomes more outlined, and so there's going to be this inner struggle between you saying no to things and the mind still wanting it. And that internal conflict, that battle between you on the one hand and chitta on the other hand, that is what is being revealed through the restraint. But it is not the restraint that is causing the pain. It is the mind, chitta, still being wild and untamed that is causing the pain here. So then to say, I am only going to gradually give things up, that's actually a wrong understanding of what the gradual training is. The gradual training begins by keeping the 8 precepts. Or as I just said, 5 precepts and then plus celibacy and non-distraction. That is where the gradual training begins. But if you say, I'm gonna only give things up gradually, then you are still giving very mixed messages to the mind. Sometimes you give in, because you say otherwise it becomes too painful, and sometimes you say no. And in that situation, there is not really any taming or training of the mind. So, by analogy, a parent is responsible for its child. And if the child is gonna throw a tantrum because it wants something and you're not giving it, then the easy thing to do is to still give the child what it wants, because it would immediately shut up. But at the same time, you're giving the child the message that becoming all emotional and wound up about not getting what it wants is the way for the child to get what it wants. So if you just look at the immediate, let's say, quieting down of the child, which is the mind in this case, then you are still creating more trouble for yourself in the long run, because next time when the child wants something, it's going to be more emotional because it gets the message that this is the way to get what it wants. So how to train or educate a child widely so that it becomes a mature, responsible adult is to basically never give it what it wants when it is emotionally invested in it to the point that it makes a drama about it. But that means that you as the parent have to stand your ground and not be afraid of saying no, and so you need to endure the upset of the child. And that is not a punishment of the child, that is your responsibility as the parent for the child to cease being a child and become a responsible adult that is not going to be childish when it doesn't get what it wants. Now it's the same with the mind, but if the parent sometimes gives in and sometimes doesn't give in, then the child is only going to become more confused. So what needs to be understood here is that the starting point is that basically you don't even see that you are a parent. Most people don't even see that they have a child and that they are responsible for it. So first, that needs to be clear. Then you need to recognize it's my responsibility to look after that child. And in the beginning, that's going to be unpleasant. But that is how it is. I mean, we didn't ask for it, but that's the situation you find yourself in. So you take responsibility and start to gradually train the mind, educate the child. But gradual means that as the parent, you firmly stand your ground and never give in when the child puts pressure on you. And as a result of that uncompromising virtue, or basically never ceasing to overlook your responsibility in relation to the child, as a result of that, the child will gradually grow up and become more mature, right? The mind will become more tamed, trained, composed. That is the direction where this is going. So gradual training means, yes, the mind gradually begins to calm down. But you cannot start adopting a gradual attitude from the beginning by saying, I'm sometimes giving in, sometimes not, because otherwise it's too painful. And if you see that something is not right, why do you still give in? Any giving in to the pressure of the mind is a weakness on your part. It's basically the parent being bossed around by its own child. Now, that's a very bad situation to be in. So it's quite important to be clear that this is what the training is. And you don't know for how long the mind is going to resist you, how much of a drama it's going to make. Maybe you think it's going to be like this for the rest of your life, but it might not be. But even if it is, you have to be prepared to then simply endure whatever impulses and appetites the mind comes up with and not give in. Because that is the criteria for what's wholesome and unwholesome. That's not determined by how the world reacts or what your preconceived ideas might be. Unwholesome action means you giving in to the pressure of the mind, which is basically the parent forgetting it's a parent and just wanting to be together with the child and then giving the child higher authority. That's the starting point. That is how this whole training starts. But it's important to realize it's a very bad situation to be in, because there is no freedom for you, and for the mind also not. You are essentially a slave to the impulses and appetites of your own mind. And the training is to turn that whole situation upside down. And the mind will resist that, because your entire life you have been running with your mind and you didn't even see that is what you were doing. So now on account of these instructions you realize, oof, I have work to do. You are going to set up that boundary. The mind will be running into it, and you have to stand your ground basically. There's no other way to tame and train a wild animal or to educate a child, whichever simile you want to pick. Now, of course, particularly when it comes to celibacy and non-distraction, that is understandably not going to be easy for many people. But then the most important thing is to still have the, let's say, the right view. You need to regard the situation rightly, in the sense, it's unacceptable to continue living my life where I'm a slave of my own mind. I don't want to continue living this way. So even if you occasionally give in out of carelessness, or you recognize I'm too weak still, I was just overpowered by my own mind, that can happen. It's not great, but then you quickly re-establish the right perspective. You say, this is a mistake, this is the wrong direction, this is contrary to the Dhamma. You re-establish yourself. So that context, that right regarding of your whole existential situation, that needs to be there, because that is what is going to prevent you tripping up too much. So even if you make a mistake, you correct it, and you will only do that if you see it as a mistake. So that's the first thing. And you basically then have to say, it's ridiculous that I cannot live my life and be comfortable and at ease with myself if I have to depend on that sexual activity, the distraction, and all the things that go against the precepts. That has to feel like an insult almost, like it's ridiculous that I cannot do this. What is this for nonsense? And so you say, no, from now on we're going to do something else. And so that is what it means to be, accomplished in self. What curiously the Sutras actually talk about. Accomplished in virtue. You are gradually showing your own mind, look, what we've done so far, that's not going to continue. From now on, I'm going to say what's right and wrong. And the mind might not immediately listen, but at some point it will have to. But, of course, also, mind will only listen if you, the parent, are not creating any opportunities for your mind to get back to you. Right? if a parent is still drinking, becoming angry, right, fighting with people, and so on, then it can say to the child, don't drink, don't smoke, don't become angry. But the child will say, yeah, I mean, when I look at you, if you are still doing that, why should I listen? And that is what the sutras mean by seeing danger in the slightest fault. That begins by you actually valuing the right things and not making any mistakes. So that whenever the mind or the child or the wild animal looks at you, it doesn't see any opening, any opportunity to get back to you. It cannot accuse you now of being a hypocrite, and then that battle continues. Every time it looks at you, it sees, oof, this guy is standing his ground. And so at some point, the mind will realize, I cannot play any tricks anymore now. So I have to deal with this guy, so let me work together. And that is when the mind becomes pliable. It actually begins to listen to your instructions. And that is what many people do not actually get. If you're not established in the virtue first, you can contemplate even the right things, the right themes that the Buddha talks about, right, that we read in the suttas. But as long as that relationship between you and your mind is not established properly, this is never going to land. Because the practice of the Dhamma is not about you having the right ideas. It's about the mind understanding for itself that it's painful to crave, to become angry, to hold on to things on account of all sorts of wrong views and understandings. So in order for the mind to get it, you need to create a situation where the mind will listen to you. That is what the virtue is about, and the sense restraint, and then, not indulging in food and not too much sleep and so on. That whole, that's the second way in which the training is gradual. Gradual doesn't mean it's slow. Gradual means that things need to happen in a certain order. Virtue, sense restraint, moderation in eating, not sleeping too much, and so on. That's one way in which the gradual training is gradual, stepwise training. And the second way in which the gradual training is gradual is that if you are uncompromising in your virtue, seeing danger in the slightest fault, only then is there a possibility for the mind to realize, I can't escape this guy, he's always there. Whenever I look at him, he is there, looking at me. And so you have to start working together, and so the mind begins to listen to you. That's how the mind becomes composed, and that is when the conflict and the opposition between you and your own mind gradually wears away. And so the pain that you initially experienced on account of the restraint, which was you over against your mind, that whole situation has now altered. And your mind becomes your ally rather than your enemy. On account of establishing yourself in virtue and understanding this principle. But if your approach from the beginning is gradual, and you still say, well, this is going to be too painful, let me every now and again give in, none of this is going to happen, because you keep giving these mixed messages, and the mind will then never listen to you when it's really important. So that's the principle to understand here.
Yeah, I thought as well that you basically make yourself dependent on whatever the mind thinks is unpleasant and pleasant. But you actually don't present it the context where you say, look, even though you might think this is still good, it's actually not good. So you basically still take the criteria of the mind rather than establishing the criteria from the suttas or from the Buddha himself.
Yeah, and so that is why the mind is in need of training, of right understanding.